Well, I just left the MCAD, and here's what I didn't tell you inside. Well, for a couple of reasons, because I wanted to tell you outside. You know, that Aesop's fable about the crane and the wolf, where the wolf chokes on something and the crane helps him. Well, what they don't tell you in that fable is that, and what the wolf might know, but tricks the crane into believing otherwise, is that cranes can fly and stand in deep water and roost in trees. Interesting, huh? Sometimes I feel like I'm walking around with wolves and with birds flying around me. So if you're a crane, do you help a wolf who is choking? Do you? And that has other meanings, doesn't it? It's kind of like bystander effect in psychology, or like nature. Now, of course, in nature, if a crane would have put its beak in a wolf's mouth, the crane would have been done. But if a wolf would have been hunting a crane that was up in a tree, there's something else you should mention, is that there's some martial arts or some techniques in training that have names in that, and there's some spirit guides that have names in that too. Interesting, right? So, do you help a choking wolf, or do you fly away? And did the wolf really trick the crane, or did the crane always know that they could fly away? So who's tricking who in that? That's something to think about, isn't it? And Stephen, you know the answer to that. And that's maddening. It's interesting too. I spoke about how that being trapped in your work, how they're all little Dorian Grays. I wonder if they see each other's work, or do they only see theirs? I noticed I walk through there quick, but that's what I do when I look at art. I walk through quick, and I go often. It's funny. So, is there a crane in the school, or are they wolves? It's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
So, if you think about it, would you rather be up in the tree, or would you rather be helping a wolf who's choking? Well, then ask yourself this: who would be a better friend, a crane or a wolf? That's hard to answer, isn't it? Because they do different things. Very hard to answer. And I think the wolf would go, and the crane would go, and then they would go. But say now you throw somebody else in there, say you throw a squirrel in there, and the squirrel could be on the ground watching the crane and the wolf, and the wolf could say to the squirrel, "Tell that crane to get down here." And the squirrel would run up the tree and say, "He wants you to get down there." And then he would run back down and say, No, they're not coming down here. And the wolf could say, go back up there and tell them. And the squirrel. And there's a tricky thing about that. Now you add a turtle, and what would the turtle do? What would the turtle do talking to the crane? Would it wait till it was in water? Hot water? Or would it hide in its shell? Now, and say, well, add this one in there. Now have an elephant. And the wolf says to the elephant, go tell the crane to come down here. And the elephant looks at the wolf and looks at the crane and sits down next to the turtle. What does the squirrel do? Probably climbs up on the elephant and sits there. And now there's a different story, and I know what you're thinking, but it's not that. I think you know, Stephen. In fact, I know you know. And there's a different story behind all of that. That's a long time ago. It's funny you took your glasses off, too. It's funny what those women, those ladies were saying when they walked by. Not that you have to personalize that, because you don't. But the irony isn't lost on you. And who would you be friends with, Stephen? And you know the answer to that. They don't. Interesting, huh? And it was about dimensions and perceptions there. I mean, looking at the art and looking at those cubicles where they work. And not that they weren't people having classes in the common areas where you remember sitting and outside there. Well, you and Susan sat outside there and smoked with a lot of the photographers. And you actually looked at people working and you saw that as art. Is that art? I mean, is that the art of observation? And what lessons are there in that? That's like having something that's so familiar to you that you walk by it every day and you forget that it's beautiful. But you don't do that, do you, Stephen? Sometimes people are like, can you get back to reality and pay attention to me? And you're like, oh, did you see that? It's a spider. And it's like this big. And you've always been like that. And that's why you get trapped. People think you're trapped in your own world. It's not because you're not paying attention, because you actually hear what they say. Sometimes you make them repeat it. I know, right? Now I'm speaking as if I'm speaking through you. And you know that too. It's interesting. I want to do that thing again. That thing about spinning this around. And how the lights change. I know I got dizzy there. Right? Did you notice anything in there besides the lights? I don't know. Well, I'm going to walk back. I'm going to go down to. Remember, I said I was going to go sit where that kind of that homeless man had set up his. Or homeless. I don't even know if it's. It could have been just set up there. See about assumptions. But I'm going to go sit there. And I have sat under bridges and watched. And what's interesting is when you sit in other people's shoes or in their lives, then you see the beauty of your own life. Not always an easy lesson. But it's one worth like looking at. Even if you like say that you're the president of a company, and if you have to give time to like get to work with your own people, like be a janitor for a day or a week. Interesting perspective then, and not have to worry about, well, maybe go to an off-site place and be a secret janitor, or let them know that you're there to help them and to understand what they're talking about. Or what they want. Now, I just had a call from somebody looking to see what I wanted, and I said, why don't you put things on the table instead of me giving you all this blanket information? Give me some job options, and then I'll tell you what I like. I'm not giving all these, And she was like, well, why don't you send me all your work history? And you emailed her back and you said, why don't you send me job offers and I'll say which one I like or if they're appropriate. Interesting, right? It is a different perspective. And I know you're like, well, why do you have to do that? Are you trying to ruin our fun about grad school and about art and stuff? And it's like, no. But knowing that you're Dorian Gray or that people are caught in their work or their profession, and I'm not talking about you, Stephen. I'm talking about that could be a fireman, that could be a police officer, that could be a groundskeeper, that could be. But knowing that helps you kind of get around it or makes you understand that sometimes it's not you, it's me. And that's confusing too. You could stop doing all of these videos, delete your whole entire computer, and you would still be you because of the way you see things and perceive things. You could destroy all your art, and you said you were gonna give some away, right? Like barter. Interesting. You said that it doesn't mean that much to you anymore, even though you kept it for all those years. It's just a weird, different thing. And it's not so much about sharing or gifting, it's about exchange. So, in that tiger and crane thing, was that an exchange? Was it an exchange? I got to fix this computer go. So, it's interesting. And I would challenge like art students and anybody really, if they're walking by something, because I was gravitated to like the bags of grass or of leaves, and I thought that's beautiful. And a lot of the reasons why I thought it was beautiful is because people take that for granted, and they do it sometimes every day in the fall. And it's just a daily thing. But they made it look so beautiful. And it almost made it look, well, I'm not going to say what you were thinking. That's why you like Mason's painting, because you saw what was behind it, and the fact that you gave him money and he could have taken off because you didn't know him from Adam. And you walked away from that day at the coffee shop thinking, he could just run away with my money. And then you said, that would be all right, because then he would have probably needed it more. And you wouldn't have felt bad about it. But he came through. You also said that he would probably end up getting a PhD in art, which would be really fun. I don't know. See about perspective? And I purposely sat in this position. Well, because there's light and shadow. And there's one of those squirrels. And too bad there's not a crane up there. But you know the other word for that and what that means. I want to see if other people know.